Ever wish you could like travel back in time 100 years ago and see what they thought was good teaching? Well, that's what this deep dive is all about, kind of. We're going back to 1924, looking at how they taught science and geography back then.
Yeah, we've got these excerpts from an old educational series, almost like a teacher's guide from back in the day.
Exactly. And you might be surprised what they considered, well, cutting edge. Like this first excerpt, the knowledge of the universe. It's all about teaching science without, overwhelming kids with big words and complicated stuff.
Right. They really believed in sparking curiosity, first and foremost, almost like you got to lay the groundwork for that love of learning instead of just like throwing facts at them.
Yeah. Get them excited about the why before you hit them with the what.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Absolutely. And to do that, they recommended all these interesting books, things like The Sciences, Life and Her Children, even one called Madam How and Lady Why.
Wow. Those are not your typical boring science textbook titles, that's for sure, especially for back then.
Right. They were really trying to connect science to everyday life, make it relatable, especially for younger students.
So like instead of just reading about, I don't know, the water cycle, they'd have the kids go outside, watch the rain, maybe even like collect it or something.
Yeah, hands-on learning was huge for them. Nature notebooks, field trips, getting those direct observations, really immersing themselves.
That makes me wonder, though, if they were so gung-ho about hands-on learning, what did they think about all the textbooks and tests they probably had back then?
Well, they actually criticized it. They weren't afraid to say that relying too much on textbooks and exams wasn't the way to go. There's even this quote from a pretty famous scientist back then, Sir Richard Gregory, and he really believed that everyone should have a good grasp of science, not just kids who are going to be scientists.
That's a pretty forward-thinking idea, especially for the 1920s. It's like they were saying that understanding science is just part of being well-rounded,
Exactly. Having that basic knowledge of how the world works, no matter what you end up doing in life. And honestly, that's still so relevant today, don't you think?
Yeah, it really does feel ahead of its time in a lot of ways. But this deep dive, it's not just about science, right? This source, it's got some strong opinions on how to teach geography, too. How to really make it stick with students.
Oh, they definitely had thoughts on that. They even go so far as to criticize what they called the utilitarian spirit that was, kind of seeping into geography lessons back then.
Utilitarian spirit, huh? So instead of letting kids, I don't know, get lost in those stories of explorers and far-off places, they were pushing for something like more practical.
Yeah, it was less about appreciating like the beauty of different places, the different cultures. It was more about, well, how to use those places for economic gain. It was a time when economic geography was getting a lot of attention, maybe overshadowing other parts of the subject.
Makes sense. So they felt like something was missing, like that sense of wonder.
Yeah, exactly. They thought it was important to foster a more, they called it a panoramic understanding of different regions, going beyond just memorizing names and borders on a map.
Okay, so how'd they actually try to create that panoramic view for students?
Well, they used the Rhone Valley as an example, right? Instead of just pointing at it on a map, you'd use vivid descriptions to almost transport your students there, talk about the climate, the vineyards, even the silk industry that was big in Lyon, really bring it to life.
Wow, so you're almost painting a picture with words, huh? Making the geography come alive.
Exactly. And this approach, it carries over to how they talk about the different continents, too. You weave together geographical features, historical anecdotes, even talk about the daily lives of people in those regions.
I'm looking at the source right now, and they've got this incredible description of a free Siberian peasant making his way across these vast landscapes. Then they contrast that with the Appalachian coal fields, totally different ways of life, all shaped by where they lived.
Exactly. Geography isn't just about locations on a map, right? It's about people, history, and the environments they live in. It's about making those connections for students, showing them how it all fits together.
Yeah, they make geography sound so real, so alive.
Yeah.
Reading this stuff makes me want to just hop on a plane and go experience it all firsthand.
That's the beauty of their approach, right? It's about sparking that curiosity, that desire to learn that goes way beyond the classroom.
Makes you wonder, even though this was all written over 100 years ago, is there stuff in here like timeless wisdom that we can still use today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this whole idea of fostering a sense of wonder, of being curious, that's more relevant than ever, especially now when it's so easy to get bogged down with information overload and standardized tests.
Right. Like, we need to remember that loving to learn is just as important as memorizing all the facts.
Exactly. It's about opening your mind to new possibilities, and that's something that really speaks to me. And they don't just talk about being curious, they also talk about how powerful storytelling and imagery can be, how it can make learning more engaging, more memorable.
Yeah, that really stood out to me too, especially with their approach to geography. They didn't just give you dry facts. They painted these pictures with their words, made those places come alive.
It reminds us that learning should be an experience, something that engages our imaginations and emotions, not just our brains.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this? How do we keep that spirit of wonder alive in ourselves and in the way we approach education?
Maybe it's as simple as remembering what it was like to be a kid, when everything was new and exciting and you wanted to learn just for the sake of learning.
I love that. Rediscover that joy of learning, explore new things, and never lose that sense of wonder. Thanks for joining us on this little trip back in time, and until next time, happy learning.